the ocean's beauty hides a ruthless side. From a TikToker's peaceful paddleboard ride in Gansbai, shattered by a great white strike, to a jetboarder's thrill in the Bahamas cut short by a hammerhead's charge, these moments show how serenity turns savage in seconds. In this video, we'll dive into 6 terrifying shark encounters that prove that beneath the calm surface, danger is always waiting to strike. On October 3, 2025, the early morning sun painted the waters of Gansbai, South Africa, in streaks of gold. These streaks danced across gentle ripples, casting a serene glow over the bay where seals bobbed lazily near the surface, their movements stirring small waves that glittered in the light. Sophia Lindstrom, a 27-year-old European influencer known for her adventurous content, balanced carefully atop her paddleboard. Her arms were extended in a graceful yoga pose as she streamed to thousands of eager TikTok followers who waited to watch her morning ritual. Unaware of the hidden danger that lurked just beneath the placid surface, she inhaled deeply, savoring the crisp, salty air and the quiet hum of the ocean, her body moving with practiced precision. Her mind focused entirely on balance and breath, completely oblivious to the massive great white circling below, its dorsal fin slicing silently through the water as it tracked the motions of seals nearby, drawn by instinct to the commotion. For several minutes, the scene remained idyllic, the only sound the faint slap of her paddle against the water and the occasional distant call of seabirds, until an abrupt, violent disturbance shattered the calm. With a sudden, bone-jarring force, the great white lunged, smashing the paddleboard beneath Sophia's feet and sending her sprawling into the water in an eruption of spray and splintered foam. Shock and fear ignited through her, her heart hammering against her chest as the shark circled, massive jaws snapping perilously close to her legs, and the sunlight glinting off its white underbelly only emphasized the scale of the predator she now faced. Instinct took over, and she thrashed violently, kicking with every ounce of strength, punching and clawing at the water as though she could repel the animal through sheer desperation, her fingers scraping against the rough fiberglass of the broken board as she tried to pull herself toward any form of stability. Each movement was a battle between panic and survival. The shark's presence was a constant, terrifying reminder of how quickly serenity could transform into mortal danger. Every splash seemed to attract its attention further as it adjusted its path, testing her endurance and resolve. Sophia's limbs ached, her breath came in ragged gasps, and the salt stung her eyes. But she refused to succumb to despair, continuously lunging for the remains of the paddleboard and trying to maintain some semblance of control. The shark circled with patient precision, its eyes dark and calculating. Though it never fully committed to a second strike, the menace of its proximity was enough to send adrenaline surging through her veins, fueling the frantic coordination that kept her body moving even as exhaustion set in. Gradually, Sophia managed to drag herself atop the battered paddleboard, the edges jagged from the impact, her skin scraped and bleeding, and she collapsed forward, gripping the board with trembling hands. At the same time, the shark continued to patrol the area, a silent, powerful presence beneath her. She scanned the water frantically for a chance to reach shallower zones, aware that every second spent in deeper waters increased her vulnerability. She began to paddle with trembling, uneven strokes, each movement measured and desperate as she inched toward the shoreline that gleamed with safety in the distance. The board wobbled precariously, threatening to tip with every wave, and she clung to it as though it were a lifeline, her chest heaving, her muscles screaming, yet refusing to surrender to the terror that had so abruptly invaded her peaceful morning. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Sophia reached the edge of the shallows where the water became more forgiving, the sandy seabed rising beneath her feet, and she staggered out of the water, dripping, bruised, and bleeding, yet alive, her mind still processing the surreal horror she had endured. The shark, having failed to secure a victim, melted back into the deeper waters, leaving only ripples that betrayed its retreat. The seals that had triggered the predator's attention scattered into safer zones, their bodies glinting in the sunlight as they disappeared. Sophia sank to her knees in the sand, exhausted and shaking uncontrollably, the adrenaline slowly ebbing, replaced by a chilling realization of how close she had come to a fatal encounter with one of the ocean's most efficient hunters. Her camera, still live and recording, captured the stark contrast of her once vibrant, smiling face now pale and smeared with blood and sand, eyes wide with shock and relief, hands trembling as they traced the scratches along her arms and legs, and viewers watching thousands of miles away reacted with a mixture of horror and disbelief as the scene unfolded. The live stream, initially intended to showcase a serene meditative practice, had transformed into a vivid testament to human vulnerability and the unpredictability of nature. It reminded all who watched that even the calmest waters could conceal lethal threats, and that survival often hinged on reflexes, resilience, and sheer determination. By the time she gathered herself enough to stand, Sophia's body still quivering, she slowly walked up the beach, the water dripping from her hair and clothes, each step a reminder of the ordeal she had endured. And though she was physically battered and emotionally shaken, there was also a sense of awe and profound respect for the raw power that had brushed so closely against her life. The golden morning light now carried a subtle tension, shadows stretching across the sand in a way that mirrored the lingering presence of danger. And the memory of the shark circling beneath the surface remained vivid in her mind, an indelible imprint of the terror and exhilaration that had collided in a single life-altering encounter. Sophia's morning of peace and calm, intended to connect her audience with serenity and mindfulness, had been violently interrupted, leaving her not only with scars and bruises, but also with a story of survival that resonated with the perilous beauty of the natural world, a reminder that even a solitary moment of tranquility can turn into a desperate fight for life when apex predators roam unseen just below the surface. On November 15, 2021, the waters of a remote Fijian lagoon shimmered in shades of turquoise and emerald, sunlight streaming through the surface in golden beams that danced over vibrant coral formations teeming with life. From darting reef fish to slow-moving sea turtles grazing along the edges of the coral heads, while gentle currents created rippling patterns across the sandy bottom. Lucas Herrera, a 32-year-old adventure diver with years of experience navigating open-water environments, gripped the handles of his newly tested underwater scooter. This sleek device was designed to allow him to glide effortlessly over the reef while conserving energy. He relished the feeling of speed, the quiet hum of the motor vibrating through the water and mixing with the soft sounds of the ocean, completely unaware that beneath him, a massive tiger shark had detected the subtle disturbance, its dark stripes blending seamlessly with the shadows cast by coral spires as it approached silently, stalking with a predator's patience. For several minutes, Lucas maneuvered over the reef, weaving between coral outcroppings, examining the colorful schools of fish that scattered at his approach, unaware that every movement and the faint vibrations of the scooter had drawn the attention of the shark, whose enormous body glided with terrifying stealth, barely disturbing the water as it angled closer from below. Then, without any warning, the creature struck, its powerful jaws clamping down on Lucas's leg with a force that threw him violently against the sharp coral. Pain searing through his body as the scooter tipped sideways, sending him spinning in a chaotic swirl of currents and broken coral fragments. At the same time, the tiger shark thrashed with controlled fury, intent on overpowering its prey. The lagoon, once calm and vibrant, transformed instantly into a maelstrom of panic and danger, the screams of bubbles and crashing coral mixing with the rhythmic pounding of his own heart, as Lucas fought to stay conscious and avoid further injury. As the shark dragged him away from the reef and toward deeper open water, Lucas kicked and twisted with everything he had, his hands clawing at the water as though he could push the massive predator off through sheer determination. But the animal's strength was overwhelming, each movement sending him spiraling in ways that threatened to tear his limbs on the jagged coral below. Fellow divers in the area, alerted by his sudden disappearance from view, surged toward him with poles, makeshift spears, and frantic gestures, shouting warnings and attempting to strike the shark without coming too close themselves, their presence adding a layer of chaotic motion to an already dangerous scene as they tried to distract the predator. At the same time, Lucas focused on staying alive, every second stretching into an eternity as his body burned with effort, muscles screaming and adrenaline surging in waves of terror and instinctual fight. The struggle continued with terrifying intensity, the tiger shark circling, twisting and lunging, as if testing the limits of its prey, and Lucas's vision blurred from the stinging of salt water and blood as he kicked and pushed, desperately trying to angle himself toward the nearest coral outcrop or sandbar that might offer refuge. The currents tugged relentlessly, making every stroke feel like swimming through resistance twice his own weight. Yet he forced himself to keep moving, each attempt to escape measured and precise despite the panic threatening to overtake him. Pain seared through his leg, torn and bleeding from the bite and scrapes against coral, and his breathing became ragged, bubbles rushing past his mask as he fought to remain calm enough to think, to plan the next desperate maneuver that might buy him a momentary advantage over the predator's brute strength. Finally, after what felt like an endless struggle, the tiger shark released its grip, perhaps spooked by the combined movements of the other divers and the chaotic noise in the water, or maybe simply satisfied with having tested its prey. Lucas tumbled in the currents, battered, bleeding, and exhausted, but alive, clinging to his upturned scooter for support. At the same time, his fellow divers reached him, guiding him toward shallower waters where he could regain stability and assess his injuries. His leg throbbed, a deep burning pain radiating through the muscles and torn tissue, and his arms ached from the continuous struggle to resist the predator's power. Yet he was conscious, his mind racing with relief, disbelief, and lingering terror, as the magnitude of what had just occurred settled around him like a heavy weight. As he reached the safety of the shallow reef, Lucas's gaze scanned the water for any sign of the tiger shark. The shark had retreated into deeper shadows, disappearing as silently as it had arrived, leaving only disturbed sand and broken coral as evidence of the violent encounter. His fellow divers, still alert and tense, helped him onto a stable portion of the reef, checking his injuries and keeping watch for any return of the predator. At the same time, Lucas's thoughts raced, reflecting on the fine line between adventure and danger, the razor-thin margin that separates curiosity and survival, and the realization that even the most advanced equipment, like his new underwater scooter, could offer no guarantee against the raw, opportunistic power of apex predators in the open ocean. The lagoon, once a paradise of color and life, now carried a sense of lingering threat, the fish skittering away from disturbed coral, the sunlight refracting off the ripples in a way that seemed sharper and more menacing. And Lucas remained acutely aware that every shadow, every shift in the currents, could hide a danger capable of ending his life in moments. By the time he rested against a coral outcrop, exhausted and still trembling, he understood that survival was the product of reflexes, resilience, and sheer determination, and that encounters with predators like the tiger shark were reminders of how unpredictable and unforgiving the ocean could be, even for those who dedicated their lives to exploring it. Lucas's experience became a cautionary tale among diving circles, a stark illustration that the thrill of adventure and the allure of high-tech gear could never erase the inherent danger of open water. And that respect for the strength and instinct of apex predators was as crucial as any equipment or training when venturing into their domain. On December 1, 2024, the cliffs above Port Lincoln were bathed in early morning light, the air crisp with ocean spray, and waves lapping rhythmically against the rocky shore, masking the hidden tension beneath their serene surface. Dylan Keene, a 29-year-old marine hobbyist fascinated by wildlife drones, adjusted the controls of his device as it hovered above a school of seals bobbing near the rocks. Their sleek bodies glinted in the sunlight as they moved in synchronized patterns, unaware of the observer above and the observer below. Dylan's focus was entirely on the screen, following the movements of the seals with a thrill of technology and nature combined. Suddenly, a gust of wind swept across the cliffs, knocking the drone from its path and sending it plunging into the surf below. The tiny craft skittered across the water like a wounded bird, threatening to vanish beneath the waves. Without hesitation, driven by instinct and a touch of recklessness, Dylan plunged into the deceptively calm waters, determined to retrieve his drone before it sank irretrievably to the ocean floor. The water seemed serene at first, cold and bracing against his skin, with only the sound of breaking surf and distant cries of seabirds above. But beneath the surface, unseen and silent, a massive great white shark had been attracted by the vibrations of Dylan's dive, drawn by the thrashing and the scent of human presence in its territory. For a moment, Dylan reached for the drone, unaware of the predator stalking him from below. Its immense body cut through the water with predatory grace, eyes dark and calculating, gills flaring with each movement as it positioned itself with the patience and precision of an apex hunter. Then, in an instant, the tranquility shattered as the shark surged upward with explosive force, clamping onto Dylan's side and shaking him violently, the world erupting into chaos as foam and spray enveloped him. the sensation of immense pressure and bone-jarring force threatening to drag him under in a violent twist of water and panic. Screams erupted from the witnesses on shore, their voices mingling with the roar of crashing waves as Dylan's bright fins disappeared beneath the turbulent whirlpool of foam and blood, the force of the attack spinning him in multiple directions, disorienting him as the shark tested its grip, shaking and bumping him with terrifying power. Every second stretched endlessly, the ocean around him turning into a chaotic blur of motion, the currents swirling unpredictably, and his limbs ached from struggling against the predator. At the same time, he tried desperately to maintain control, clawing at the water and grasping instinctively for any object that might keep him afloat or slow the assault. Pain seared through his ribs and side, a burning agony that sharpened his focus, and adrenaline surged through every vein, fueling the frantic coordination that kept him moving even as the world threatened to tip into darkness. Finally, through a combination of sheer will, frantic kicks, and the chaotic distraction caused by the surf, Dylan managed to wrench himself free, spinning toward a nearby buoy as the shark circled, snapping its massive jaws and bumping him repeatedly with its snout in a display of territorial dominance and testing. Each impact sent shivers of pain through his body, yet he pushed forward, his arms thrashing, feet kicking, and lungs burning, his consciousness oscillating between focus and the encroaching haze of shock. The predator, massive and relentless, seemed poised to strike again at any moment. Still, Dylan's desperate maneuvering and the chaotic movements of the waves created enough uncertainty to keep it from committing to another full bite, at least for the crucial seconds that separated life from death. As he clung to the buoy, gasping and trembling, a small fishing boat appeared over the waves, drawn by the screams from the cliffs and the visible commotion in the water, and the crew immediately tossed ropes and extended their arms, dragging him aboard just as the shark lunged from the depths once more, its great bulk vanishing beneath the surface with a final, powerful splash. Dylan collapsed onto the deck, barely conscious, his side torn open, blood mixing with seawater and foam, muscles trembling and heart hammering in the lingering terror of the encounter. His fellow fishermen worked quickly, securing him, pressing makeshift bandages to stem the bleeding while calling for emergency assistance. Aware that every minute mattered in preventing further blood loss and shock, the reality of his injuries underscoring the sudden, merciless danger that had erupted from a momentary lapse in caution. The water around Port Lincoln, normally a picturesque playground for wildlife enthusiasts, now seemed infused with the weight of peril. Waves rolled innocently across the surface while beneath, the shark patrolled silently, indifferent to human presence, a predator defined by instinct and power. Dylan's mind, slowly clearing from shock and adrenaline, processed the surreal violence of the attack, the chaotic spinning currents, the explosive force of the shark's strike, and the narrow margin that had saved his life. Every movement, every decision had been amplified in significance. The morning that began with the quiet satisfaction of observing seals through a lens of technology had ended in a desperate, life-threatening struggle that underscored the unforgiving nature of apex predators. By the time Dylan was stabilized and airlifted to medical care, the story of his encounter had already begun to circulate among locals and marine enthusiasts, serving as a stark reminder that even seemingly harmless activities, retrieving a drone, observing marine life, or enjoying open water, could quickly escalate into deadly encounters when humans entered the domain of apex predators. His survival was owed not only to luck, but to presence of mind, the brief intervention of the fishing crew, and a relentless drive to cling to life amidst one of the ocean's most powerful hunters, a lesson etched in blood, foam, and trembling muscles, and one that would resonate with divers, hobbyists, and adventurers for years to come as a chilling example of nature's unforgiving force. On February 18, 2025, the waters off Auckland shimmered in brilliant hues of blue and silver. Sunlight sliced through the surface, illuminating schools of small fish weaving through the currents. The distant hum of boats and the cries of seabirds added faint textures to the morning calm. Ewan Fraser, a 34-year-old underwater photographer known for his daring expeditions, leaned over the edge of his small boat, camera in hand, intent on capturing striking footage of a nearby tuna school whose sleek bodies flashed like polished metal beneath the waves. His mind was focused entirely on composition, angles, and the play of light across the water, unaware that a predator of terrifying speed and precision had already sensed the disturbance. Drawn by the movement of the boat, the vibrations of the dangling camera, and the faint scent of human presence mixing with the salt water. Beneath the glimmering surface, a short-finned mako shark, sleek and muscular, cut silently through the water, its dark, pointed snout slicing through currents as it approached with lethal intent, eyes fixed on its target. For several seconds the scene remained deceptively serene, with only the sounds of waves lapping against the hull and Ewan's careful adjustments to the camera strap, until an explosive burst of motion shattered the calm. In an instant, the mako lunged with terrifying speed, its jaws clamping onto Ewan's forearm with crushing force, pain erupting like fire through his muscles as the predator thrashed violently, spinning his arm and dragging him toward the water with brutal power. The camera shattered on impact, shards of plastic and metal spiraling into the waves while blood spread across the surface in dark, ominous clouds that glimmered in the sunlight. Ewan's heart raced as instinct took over, his free hand scrabbling at the water, gripping the boat edge, and his legs kicking frantically to keep from being pulled completely under. His body thrown into a chaotic whirl of shock, fear, and unrelenting force. The crew reacted instantly, shouting warnings and scrambling to intervene, their voices mixed with the roar of the water as they swung paddles, ropes, and improvised tools at the shark, striking at its head and body in desperate attempts to force it to release its grip. Each strike created splashes, bubbles, and tension in the water. Yet the mako responded with agility and relentless determination, circling aggressively, testing the human's strength and resolve while keeping its powerful teeth locked on Ewan's forearm. The scene became a tumult of motion and sound, a vortex of danger in which every second carried life or death weight, and Ewan's body was forced to respond with raw, unfiltered instinct, pulling, twisting, and thrashing to resist the predator's control, muscles burning and adrenaline surging through every vein. Minutes, though seeming like hours, passed in a blur of chaos, the shark spinning, lunging, and twisting with a terrifying combination of speed and precision, while Ewan clung to the boat, desperately trying to reduce leverage and maintain any form of control over the situation. The splintered remnants of his camera floated around him, while small fish scattered from the violent commotion, adding brief flashes of silver to the crimson-stained water, a chaotic dance between life and death. Each strike from the shark sent jolts of pain up his arm, a constant reminder of the predator's power. At the same time, each countermove required every ounce of strength, focus, and courage he could muster, knowing that any lapse might result in a far more catastrophic injury. Finally, a precise combination of timing, brute force, and distraction allowed Ewan to wrench his arm free, twisting against the predator's momentum while the crew continued to strike and splash, creating enough confusion for him to break the shark's grip and haul himself backward onto the boat. He collapsed onto the deck, trembling violently, blood soaking through his sleeve and dripping across the wooden surface, every heartbeat pounding with the lingering terror of the encounter. The shark circled once more beneath the surface, its dark dorsal fin slicing through the water in a silent warning, before it retreated into deeper zones, leaving the boat and its occupants stunned and shaken. Ewan's arm throbbed with burning pain, the skin torn in deep lacerations, muscles bruised, and every nerve on high alert. Yet he was alive, conscious, and slowly processing the narrow escape from a predator capable of killing with a single, perfectly executed strike. The crew worked quickly to stabilize him by applying bandages, tying pressure wraps, and monitoring his condition. They also kept a careful watch on the water, ensuring the shark did not return. Ewan's mind alternated between disbelief, lingering terror, and gratitude. The experience left him acutely aware of how quickly routine or seemingly harmless activities could spiral into life-threatening encounters in predator-rich waters. The vibrant, sparkling ocean, once a canvas for his creative work, now carried a shadow of danger. The memory of the shark's speed, power, and aggression was etched into his consciousness with a clarity that no camera lens could ever capture. By the time they returned to shore, the attack had become a stark reminder of the ocean's unpredictability and the thin margin that separates safety from mortal danger when humans enter the realm of apex predators. Ewan's photographs, intended to celebrate marine beauty, were overshadowed by the visceral memory of the mako's jaws clamping onto his arm, the violent thrashing, and the crimson-stained water, a testament to the fragile balance between curiosity, adventure, and survival. The incident would serve as a chilling lesson to divers, photographers, and anyone venturing into open water, demonstrating that even brief moments of observation, can provoke encounters capable of testing the limits of endurance, courage, and human instinct against one of the ocean's most formidable hunters. On February 2, 2020, the normally sun-baked streets of Queensland had transformed overnight into raging rivers, swollen by record-breaking floods that swept through neighborhoods, tearing up debris, overturning vehicles, and carrying everything in their path with relentless force. Tom Whelan, a 28-year-old local surfer familiar with the rhythms of ocean currents but unprepared for the chaos of inland waters, stood ankle-deep in brown, churning water at the edge of a submerged street, scanning for signs of life and human or animal in danger. His attention was drawn to a small dog clinging desperately to a floating plank, its fur matted with mud, eyes wide with terror as the current tugged at its frail body. Without hesitation, Tom waded deeper, muscles straining against the sudden strength of the floodwaters. Adrenaline surged as he paddled forward, determined to reach the animal and pull it to safety before the surging current carried it away entirely. The water was deceptively alive. Though it appeared murky and sluggish from above beneath the surface, the flood had brought more than debris and displaced animals. Bull sharks, known for their ability to navigate both salt and fresh water, had swum inland with the tide. Their powerful forms were invisible in the brown torrent, moving with predatory patience, drawn by vibrations and erratic movements in the water. Tom reached the plank, gripping the dog with one arm while attempting to stabilize himself against the rushing current. Unaware of the predator silently approaching from below, its massive body cut through the water with terrifying speed and precision. The dog whimpered, pressing against him, and for a brief, serene second, the rescue seemed within reach, the chaos of the flood muted by Tom's focus on his mission. Then, without warning, a violent force struck his leg with the explosive power of a torpedo, pain erupting immediately as the bull shark clamped onto his calf, teeth sinking deep and holding with unyielding pressure. The current carried him and the dog in a chaotic spin, twisting violently as the predator tested its grip. Each thrash sent him tumbling and scraping along submerged vehicles and jagged debris hidden beneath the muddy water. Neighbors who had sought refuge on rooftops screamed, pointing and shouting instructions that barely cut through the roar of rushing water. Their panic mingled with Tom's own, creating a cacophony that underscored the raw intensity of the life-and-death struggle unfolding beneath the surface. Instinct and sheer will drove Tom's movements, kicking, thrashing, and twisting in a desperate attempt to break free, while keeping the dog safe against his chest. Every motion was calculated against pain, current, and the predator's strength. The shark responded with relentless pressure, circling and twisting, forcing Tom to adapt instantly to survive. The dog's small body shivered against him, claws digging into his shirt as he fought to maintain balance on a half-submerged car that bobbed precariously in the floodwaters. Each jolt from the shark sent searing pain through his leg, ripping at muscle and tendon with a force that blurred his vision and made every heartbeat echo like a drum in his ears. Minutes passed in a disorienting blur, each second an eternity as Tom's body burned with effort, lungs straining against the need for oxygen, mind focused entirely on resisting the predator's grip. The floodwaters surged unpredictably, carrying him, the dog, and the car in dizzying arcs that tossed him like a rag doll. At the same time, the bull shark continued to circle, testing, nudging, and striking with terrifying intelligence and power, as if measuring the limits of its prey. The chaos of water, debris, and blood created a vortex of danger, yet Tom forced himself to remain calm enough to anticipate the predator's movements, positioning his body and leveraging the car to reduce the shark's effectiveness. Every motion was a balance between survival and maintaining the fragile safety of the dog in his arms. Finally, through a combination of adrenaline-fueled reflexes and opportunistic movement, Tom managed to free his leg from the predator's jaws, twisting violently against the current while keeping the dog pressed close. The shark released him, circling briefly in confusion before retreating into the turbid brown depths, leaving only ripples, broken debris, and the coppery tinge of blood as evidence of the near-fatal encounter. Tom collapsed against the half-submerged car, shaking violently, blood seeping through the water from deep lacerations along his calf, every muscle screaming, every nerve alive with residual terror, and the dog whimpered, shivering in exhaustion as they clung to each other amidst the relentless surge. Paramedics arrived within minutes, wading through the floodwaters, stabilizing Tom, applying field dressings to stem the bleeding, and carefully securing both him and the dog before hauling them to a safer zone. His leg, though battered and torn, had been spared amputation, and the medical team marveled at his survival given the unpredictability and strength of the bull shark, as well as the power of the floodwaters themselves. Every instinct, every second of focus, and every ounce of strength had been tested, leaving Tom with not only physical scars, but an indelible understanding of how quickly a situation that seemed heroic and controlled could erupt into life-threatening chaos. The incident spread through the local news and social media, a haunting story of bravery and vulnerability, a stark reminder that bull sharks thrive in environments most people assume are safe: rivers, floods, and even city streets where ordinary life intersects with the extraordinary adaptability of one of the ocean's most aggressive predators. For Tom, the memory of the murky floodwaters, the sudden strike, and the twisting, relentless power of the bull shark would remain vivid for years. A chilling lesson in respect for the raw, unpredictable forces that exist just beneath the surface, waiting for a moment to assert their dominance in the least expected of places. On August 10, 2025, the turquoise waters off the Bahamas sparkled under a bright summer sun, the surface shimmering with patterns of light that danced across coral reefs and sandy flats beneath. Noah Vance, a 26-year-old thrill-seeker with a reputation for testing the latest water sports gadgets, gripped the handles of his new electric jetboard, feeling the hum of the motor vibrate through his arms and chest as he skimmed across the waves with explosive speed, cutting arcs and jumps that sent spray glittering into the air. The sensation of flight over water thrilled him. The rush of wind and spray mingled with the roar of the motor, yet the vibrations beneath the surface betrayed him, radiating through the water like a siren song for predators lying in the depths, waiting for the slightest hint of weakness or movement. Beneath the surface, a massive 10-foot great hammerhead shark had sensed the disturbance. Its wide, flattened head swept from side to side as it tracked the subtle vibrations and scent of human activity in its territory, eyes dark and calculating on either side of the strange, hammer-shaped snout. For several seconds, Noah raced across the waves, performing tight turns and daring maneuvers, completely unaware of the shadow moving with predatory precision below. Then, without warning, the predator surged upward with explosive power, colliding violently with the underside of the board. The force threw Noah into the water with a sickening crack of impact, his body tumbling through the current, arms and legs flailing as he struggled to regain orientation in the turbulent, crystal-clear water. The jetboard skidded away from him, falling like a cork in the waves, and a red trail of blood blossomed as the shark's jaws snapped dangerously close. Disoriented and gasping for air, Noah surfaced just as the hammerhead circled, its broad head sweeping side to side, tracking his every movement with unnerving precision, the odd shape amplifying the menace of its presence. Each movement of his limbs sent vibrations across the water that seemed to draw the predator closer, testing his reactions, measuring his strength, and exploiting every instinct-driven hesitation. Noah's heart pounded in his chest, his lungs burning from the abrupt exertion. Yet he forced himself to focus, pushing downward and kicking toward the floating board, hoping to regain some semblance of stability, leverage, and defense in the open water. The shark struck again with alarming speed, ramming the jetboard to the side and grazing Noah's arm with its powerful jaws, tearing through neoprene and drawing blood into the water that quickly spread around him in reddish clouds. Each pulse and kick from the predator forcing him to twist and thrash to avoid a more severe bite. His arms ached, his legs burned from repeated kicks against the current, and his vision blurred slightly from the sting of salt water mixed with adrenaline and fear. Still, survival instinct propelled every movement, dictating every breath and kick as he struggled to maintain consciousness and maneuver towards safety. The predator's odd, sweeping head movements made its attacks unpredictable. The sheer size and power of its body created waves of water that pushed it off balance and threatened to drag it under with each calculated surge. Moments stretched like hours as Noah's friends on a nearby boat watched in horror, shouting warnings and throwing ropes in a desperate attempt to distract the shark and provide a lifeline to the struggling thrill-seeker. They swung paddles, thumped the water, and yelled, their voices straining over the roar of the motor and the slap of waves, creating chaos that added urgency to the already perilous scene. Each intervention drew the shark's attention, yet the predator remained relentless, circling and probing, keenly aware of the vibrations, assessing which movement represented weakness and which was an act of resistance. Noah's movements became more frantic, guided by a combination of fear, pain, and determination to survive. Each stroke toward the jetboard a calculation between leverage and exposure to the predator's powerful, unpredictable attacks. Finally, with a combination of effort, timing, and the chaotic distraction created by his friends, Noah managed to scramble onto the overturned board, holding himself just enough above the water to reduce the shark's ability to strike effectively. The predator circled once more, testing the limits of its opportunity before retreating slowly into deeper waters, leaving only ripples, foamy water, and scattered debris in its wake. His body shook violently from exertion and shock, blood dripping from a deep cut along his forearm, his chest heaving as adrenaline gradually subsided, leaving him with the raw ache of muscles taxed beyond normal limits and the lingering terror of what had just occurred. Noah's friends hauled him aboard the boat seconds later, their arms wrapped tightly around him to prevent him from slipping back into the water, and he collapsed, trembling, breathing heavily, his skin pale from the combination of blood loss and the extreme stress of the encounter. The jetboard, once a source of exhilarating freedom, now seemed a fragile lifeline in contrast to the raw, unrelenting power of a predator that had turned a moment of sport into a desperate struggle for survival. Even in shallow water, he remained acutely aware of the vulnerability imposed by the ocean. The lesson was written in every ache, scrape, and shiver that ran through him, a visceral reminder of how quickly modern adventure could turn into near-fatal danger when apex predators lie beneath the surface. By the time the boat returned to shore, the story of the encounter had already begun to ripple across social media and local networks, a chilling testament to the fine line that exists between thrill and peril in predator-rich waters. For Noah, the memory of the hammerhead's massive head sweeping side to side, the explosive strikes, and the sensation of being tossed in the ocean with blood swirling around him would remain vivid for years, a permanent reminder that even the most advanced watercraft cannot shield a human from instinct-driven violence lurking below, and that every aquatic adventure carries the potential to transform in seconds from exhilaration into a fight for life.